Clemson and Mizzou scrimmage, quotes from there, Alabama, Arkansas, Florida, and news and notes from across college football after the stinger. Hello and welcome to episode 21 of Good Morning College Football. I am Nicholas Ian Allen of CampusToCanton.com and CFB Winning Edge. Campus to Canton, if you're unfamiliar, is a college fantasy football company playing the C2C format that encompasses both college and NFL players. We've got a wide range of content options available at CampusToCanton.com. One of those has recently been published, the 2024 Freshman and Supplemental Guide, which includes full write-ups for over 175 players, rankings, advanced metrics, much more. Do please check that out. You can order it at the site. And if you haven't yet, please, we would love for you to subscribe to this channel. Thank you so much to those of you who are helping us to pursue the 4,000 subscriber goal that we have ahead of the NFL draft. Also, thanks, of course, to those of you who have subscribed at CampusToCanton.com for as little as $2.99 per month. Get a wide range of content there, including written posts, access to our Discord, the availability of plenty of tools and data, and of course, a very special thanks to those of you who have subscribed at the C2C Winning Edge or All 22 level, which gives you the most in-depth access to everything that we offer. And on that note, we finally have a set schedule, at least for a little while, for Good Morning College Football. I've talked about it a little, probably in too much length, a bit last week, but we're going to go to a Monday, Wednesday, Friday schedule starting this week. And that's going to help us to be able to designate, a few full work days to really make some progress on our 2024 CFB Winning Edge team profiles. Those we are hoping to be published around May 1st. Once that is done, once all of those are ready to go and available to our subscribers, we may reevaluate whether we want to stick at Monday, Wednesday, Friday, or if we want to expand back to just about every weekday. But for now, starting this week and likely to continue unless something major happens and we have to spend some time talking about it on a Tuesday or Thursday, we will plan on going live at 10 a.m. each Monday, Wednesday, Friday, moving forward. So getting ready to move into our weekend roundup. The first item of note, Clemson had a spring practice scrimmage over the weekend. Will Vandervoort of the Clemson Insider spoke with some players, including Clemson running back Phil Mafah, who, according to Vandervoort, said the offense got the best of the defense during the first in-stadium scrimmage this spring. Mafah said the offense was moving the football all afternoon. Quarterbacks were slinging the ball around. The offensive line had great protections. The backs had great protections, and the receivers were making plays. And most importantly, the offense was finishing drives. So here a quote from Mafah: "Everything seemed to be working in our favor, and we finished. That is one thing we wanted to respond with. We finished many times, and that was great to see." Mafah also said that freshman wide receiver Bryant Wesco made a couple of big plays in the scrimmage, including a one-handed catch on a fade pass in which Wesco tipped the ball to himself and was able to bring it in with one hand. Matt Connolly of On3 offered an update on Clemson wide receiver Troy Stellato, including some quotes from head coach Dabo Swinney, who recently said, "Troy's always banged up, always. I've never seen him when something's not hurting on him. He's got a hurt thumb or finger or something, but he battles through it. He's a tough kid." So we mentioned that Stellato seemed like he had tweak something early in spring practice. He's not the only Clemson wide receiver who's been a little bit banged up early on. We touched on Tyler Brown, the true freshman, who is limited to start spring, not out there immediately. We talked about Noble Johnson has been sidelined. Stellato and Adam Randall at different points have come up limping or dealing with something. So Stellato, unfortunately, it sounds like it's going to force him to shut down a little early this spring. So according to Swinney, Stellato is currently dealing with an injury that will require surgery in a couple of weeks. He will shut down his spring March 13th following practice number 10. That is when the Tigers will have a little bit of a break from spring practice because the university will be on spring break. The plan is to return on March 24th, but Stellato, during that period, it sounds like is going to have surgery, and that's going to force him to miss that second half, that back portion of a spring practice. Quoting here, Swinney said, "He's actually a guy that probably will not finish spring. We made a decision on him. Nothing major, but he needs a cleanup surgery. But we made the decision that he needed to really get all the spring he can before we did that." There were also some notes following the scrimmage. Tight end Jake Briningstool, who was very high on Wesco, talked about how he was making plays in the scrimmage. According to Briningstool, freshman wideout Chase Bird also made some plays, as did Antonio Williams, Cole Turner, who was back and healthy, and Stellato. So that injury, whatever it is that he's dealing with, he has been able to practice, was able to participate in the scrimmage, but to get back and ready for the fall campaign, shutting him down a little early this spring sounds like the right way forward. Briningstool quoted here as saying, "Everybody is kind of stepping up and being themselves. Then we got the run game. You just got to pick your poison with what we've got. So I think we just take off from there and continue to get better." That's from Darian Carter of the Greenville News, was also on hand and able to pass along some of those quotes. Something that caught my eye prior to the scrimmage for Clemson, and we ran out of time on Friday to discuss this, but Austin Hannon of Clemson 247 wrote up a piece that talked a little bit about Cade Klubnik and offensive coordinator Garrett Riley, how Clemson is expected to use tempo more in 2024. And part of that, as the piece starts, dates back to the bowl game, when the Tigers were trailing 35-30 with a little over 2.5 minutes to play. The Tigers went on a 12-play, 68-yard drive to beat Kentucky in the Gator Bowl. So that, of course, was a nice high to end the season on. It also showed Garrett Riley's system, what it could look like when things are moving smoothly, and the tempo being a big piece of that. Of course, anything you've heard any coach over the last 2 decades talking about going up tempo, one of the major things that's often referenced is, hey, why don't we do the 2-minute style of offense all game and really put the defense at a disadvantage. That's come in and out at certain places, and tempo isn't quite as common across college football as it was maybe in the early 2000s when things were really ramping up towards the end of the first half of the decade. But it's something that some teams really find success with still, and perhaps Clemson and Klubnik specifically seems to really like it and hope that the Tigers will implement tempo a little bit more. So quoting here from the piece from Hannon, Cade Klubnik said, "I definitely like the tempo," talking about that drive, "for sure. Later on, he said, it was just doing what we do and doing it very efficiently. We didn't need to do anything crazy to be efficient. And I think that's where this offense is very, very elite, is when we're doing the simple plays and the routine plays and doing them very, very efficiently." Later on, continuing, he said, I think that drive is exactly what we picture our offense being as a whole. So I was on the most recent episode of Chasing the Natty with Jared Palmgren, and we talked a little bit about Clemson, about their spring practice thus far. And we talked a little bit, I personally am fairly optimistic about Clemson offensively. I know our CFP Winning Edge team strength power rankings are going to be pretty high on Clemson. I expect that they will probably be our preseason ACC favorite. But I also think that, Klubnik is going to be put in a pretty good position to bounce back. And certainly last year was a little bit disappointing from a college fantasy football standpoint, certainly compared to what we expected when Klubnik ascended to the starting quarterback job and DJ Uiagalelei transferred out. But perhaps part of the success, not only getting a full season under his belt now as a starter, a full season with Garrett Riley, but really focusing on, hey, where were we at our best last season? And it seems like perhaps, that final drive of the year really was it. And one of the things, maybe one of the takeaways that can be applied to the future is going a little faster offensively. Dabo Swinney finishing here in that piece said he wants to see more pace within the offense as well, but in order to do that, the unit must first master the simple things and avoid mistakes. Quoting here, Swinney said, I think that's all dictated by staying on schedule, being efficient, not having negative plays, those types of things. Once you get that rhythm going, then you can really drive the tempo. But it starts with just being more efficient and precise in what we do. So, first things first, be efficient, take care of business, but also when there's an opportunity to really get things going faster and maybe put the most pressure on the opponent, maybe going a little, faster tempo-wise is going to be part of that. All right, transitioning now to Missouri. Austin Bidwell of Mizzou Central was on hand, partly with offensive coordinator Kirby Moore speaking with the media on Saturday following the spring scrimmage. Mizzou is halfway through its spring practices, have 8 practices now under their 8 of the 15 under their belts. Quoting here, talking about the standouts through those 8 practices, Kirby Moore said there's a multitude of guys. From a quarterback perspective, I do think that Brett Brown is a guy that's made the most of his opportunities. He has to continue to do that, but he's made some big throws the last couple of practices. Marquise Johnson has to continue to take that next step. We've seen what he can do down the field, but just from a reading, not thinking process in terms of our play calls, because we do have a lot of pre-snap, talking about movement, whether it's motion, different pictures for the defense so we can have to continue to communicate. What's my alignment? What's my landmark? So, the quarterback situation at Missouri, we've touched on it briefly behind Brady Cook. There's been a real lack of depth. So, good news for Missouri that Brown has impressed. Sounds like, Marquise Johnson certainly in the mix there as well. But there was also a report, I believe first reported by Pete Thamel, that quarterback Drew Pine is going to be joining the Tigers for the 2024 season. Not sure if that's official yet, but I know it has been reported by Thamel and at multiple places. Pine was at Arizona State last season, played 2 games there. He was the starter at Notre Dame in 2022 after replacing injured Tyler Buckner. He threw for 2,021 yards and 22 touchdowns with 6 interceptions and made 10 starts for the Irish that season. I believe Pine, it sounds like, has 3 years of eligibility remaining. So not expected, to be the starter. Brady Cook is firmly entrenched there, but certainly a veteran that you can feel a lot better about the quarterback situation as a whole, especially if something were to happen to Cook in Columbia this season. There were a couple of other players, few other players who were mentioned as Moore was asked by reporters about tight end Brett Norfleet. So quoting here, Moore said, Brett, I believe, is up to 255 pounds. He looks really, really good, playing confident. You saw last season, game 5, going into the LSU game, just the physicality that he brought. That's continued from a detail standpoint. I think he's progressing as a receiver. When we get in third down situations, I don't think going forward we have to focus on the wide receivers. The tight end should be a part of that. So I'm personally pretty high on Norfleet. Liked what I read about him in the C2C freshman supplemental guide last year. Thought that we really saw some evidence that he's in line for an even bigger role and opportunity this year. Moore also discussed the potential usage of transfer running backs Marcus Carroll and Nate Noel. Quote, we're still working through that process today, right away. Nate made a few plays out in space, making guys miss, catches the ball in the open field. You think he's going to get tackled? No, puts the juke move on. From Marcus Carroll, just a physical, downhill, inside zone, made several nice runs throughout the day. So Nate Noel is the shiftier of the two. That's no surprise to anybody who saw him at Appalachian State and his former Sun Belt rival Carroll at Georgia State. Certainly, more of the physical runner. We saw that with him in the Panthers last season. But very interesting to see how that all shakes out. Parker Gillum of Rock M Nation found some quotes from Moore where he discussed the scrimmage and the wide receiver room. Moore here said, Theo Wease made a big contested catch on our first down drive, or our first drive down the field, and we started fast. But we have to be more consistent, and that's concerning all things, from pre-snap to assignments. He later said, we want to be able to move guys around during the season. We don't want Theo Wease to always be the X or Luther Burden always be the slot. So that's something that certainly from a CFF standpoint has been a talking point. And again, Jared and I discussed that, I believe, at North Texas. I personally think that in most cases, it's a little bit overblown. Who's the X? Who's the Y? Who's the slot? There are certainly some offenses where there's a long track record of success in a particular spot. And as I told Jared, you have to, because he did a really great job laying out the situation at North Texas and the history of the outside receivers and Eric Morris's offense and how well that they have produced in the past. And so who can we try to anticipate who's going to come up and be the next player to really take on that role. Sometimes you just can't ignore it. Perhaps I don't pay enough attention in those situations where it truly is proven. Usually when I'm building our team profiles and our projected depth charts, I don't put the positions X, Y, Z or slot, outside, whatever. I put wide receiver, and I'm more focused on the pecking order. Okay, who's going to get the top targets, put them in first? Who's going to get the second most targets, number 2? Who's going to get the third? Because my focus generally is, who is the best player, and regardless of what position they end up playing, or like it sounds like Missouri wants to do, some offenses are really good at making it so you can't just key on one guy in one spot. Want to cross-train receivers to learn multiple positions so you can move them around, do different things, create other matchups. So just a little bit of a thought there as we get going. It certainly matters some places. That's been proven. It doesn't matter everywhere, but interesting to me that Mizzou really wants to take its veteran receivers, Wease and Burden, it sounds like, and try to move them around a little bit. All right. At Florida, the Gators had their second spring practice on Saturday. They will be, a lot of teams do this. It's different a lot of places, different ways of setting up the schedule. But Florida does something that quite a few others do. They'll have those first 2 practices in shorts and t-shirts, and then take a little bit of a break and kind of restart when you're able to put on shoulder pads and then full pads later on. So that seems to be the case for Florida. They will be off from March 9th to March 16th. We're off March 9th and we'll be off until spring break ends on March 16th. Florida is not fully dressed in pads so far, but with those 13 practices remaining, the vast majority of those will be, if not full pads, at least shells or shoulder pads and maybe some lower body pads, but not full pads. Anyway, from All Gators, Zach Goodall had some notes from that second spring practice. On the defensive side of the ball, good news that Justice Boone has made his return to action. He is lined up as a strong side defensive end. He has been a little bit limited due to recovery from the ACL he suffered during fall camp last year, but Boone is back and taking those first reps at the F strong side defensive end position. There's a list of players who are participating but wearing non-contact jerseys. That includes running back Cam Carroll, who's also recovering from a knee injury. Wide receiver Chimere Dike, his injury is currently undisclosed. Boone was in one of those while he recovers from a knee injury. Fellow defensive lineman Joey Slackman has been dealing with an arm injury. Linebacker Shamar James, has a knee, and Derek Wingo undisclosed. But those were the players on the field, but not participating in any contact. The players who had a no contact jersey and did not participate include tight end Keon Zipperer, who's also recovering from a knee injury. Offensive lineman Austin Barber has an upper body injury, and edge Jack Pyburn a knee. Nick Delatorre of Gators Online was on hand for an interview with quarterback Graham Mertz. He also spoke with Billy Napier about his quarterback. Quote, the first thing I would say is that he has the respect of the entire organization and the respect of his teammates. That's Billy Napier speaking. I think over time, his example, not only with his work ethic, but I think as a competitor, has the toughness, the way he prepares, the way he treats people, not just his teammates, but I would say all throughout the building. He's a consummate pro. Graham Mertz was at the podium as well recently, and according to Delatorre, had some quotes, gave a little insight on how he felt because, Graham Mertz, generally speaking, there were a lot of folks who were really underwhelmed with how his career played out at Wisconsin. Started off on such a high, not only as the most or the highest rated quarterback recruit in school history, I believe, but came out, had that start against Illinois where he just absolutely could not miss. And then from there, struggled at times, was very inconsistent. Last year at Florida, the numbers ended up being very, very good. And Mertz played well, unfortunately ended his season early due to injury. But part of the things that, Mertz touched on after throwing for nearly 2,900 yards and 20 touchdowns and only 3 interceptions last season, he's not concerned really about the numbers other than what's in the win column. So from Delatorre here, quoting Mertz, I don't really place my satisfaction on that. Frankly, I was unsatisfied with last year. I base my satisfaction off did we win every game? And I think that that's the only way to go about playing this game and being at the quarterback position. I think that's what should drive you. I don't really ever try to put weight into external things, good, bad, or ugly, because I personally don't think that has any impact on how I'm doing my job. And then cutting down to the bottom line, which means the most when we're talking about Billy Napier, certainly, as we look ahead to 2024, Mertz finishes with, we won 5 games, point blank. That's not it. That's why I'm back, and that's why we're fixing it. So haven't fully gotten into the full 2024 updates in our Florida team profile, but I'm really interested to see it because we've touched on it before that the Gators have probably the toughest schedule in college football. I mean, just absolutely brutal. I think that we will see a better team in 2024. We do a team performance rating where we dig into a huge number of advanced stats and put an overall grade on how well a team is playing on the field. It's basically a team-wide, overall rating, like we have our individual player ratings. And for Florida, they might end up, playing much better on the field. Will that translate to more wins? That is certainly the big question. At Alabama, we got more out of spring practice, and Katie Wyndham of Bama Central noted some things that missed my attention in that first bit of news that came out last week. A couple of observations that we might have missed. Justice Haynes and Jam Miller have been splitting the reps at number 1. The two apparently went back and forth as the leaders in positional drills. There's also a little bit of injury observation last week. According to Wyndham, the only player she saw in a black non-contact jersey, other than, of course, the quarterbacks, was tight end CJ Dippre. He was off on the side, working on his own during the media viewing period. Defensive lineman Jaheim Oates was not seen at practice during the media viewing period. And then over the weekend, offensive coordinator Nick Sheridan was on hand following the Tide's third practice on Friday. And Wyndham was there to pass along some quotes from Sheridan on how confident he is in Jalen Milroe. Sheridan said, quote, "Very confident. He's an extremely talented kid. I think more than anything, he's just a great person. I've really enjoyed getting to know him and his family. Obviously, everybody knows the talent, the explosiveness as a passer. Obviously, he's very electric as a runner as well, but I've just enjoyed getting to know him as a person, what his history's been, what his journey has been." One of the next items of note: what are the two biggest objectives for the offense this spring in Tuscaloosa? Sheridan said, quote, "I think number 1, install our systems, the scheme that's involved, and then number 2, to make sure that our style of play, that we're executing those plays with the right mentality and the right mindset. There's certainly fundamentals involved in both of those areas, but knowing what to do and how to do it, that's really what we're focused on this spring." Sheridan also went pretty in depth on Caleb Odom, the true freshman who did participate in spring practices, I believe, and that coaching staff, Sheridan included, got to, maybe there's something that they were able to learn from that. But Odom, is listed as a tight end on the Alabama depth chart. That's important for CFF purposes. Is he going to be given that designation moving forward, especially because early in spring practice, at least, and according to teammates, he's been a wide receiver. So even with Dippre out or limited this spring, Odom, the true freshman, still sounds like getting almost all, if not all, his reps at wide receiver. But quoting here, Sheridan said, "I think with Caleb, we're just trying to put him in a position to be successful early on in his career. He's a big kid. He's very athletic. He's very explosive. He has a great frame. How his body grows and what he turns into being when he's 20, 21, 22 years old, I think time will tell. He certainly runs good enough to play wide receiver. He runs very well. He's a big target. So we just tried to put him in a position early on to not try to run into 275-pound people, but put him in a position so he can have success." So at least part of the reasoning, it sounds like, because any true freshman, despite coming in at 6'5", 225, 230, whatever it is that Odom is, they're not simply, as developed, as experienced, certainly, but also guys just add a little bit of strength, fill out a little bit more once they get some college under their belt, whether it's the dining hall, the weight room, all that good stuff. So Odom, this staff wanted him, it sounds like, to play wide receiver more, so perhaps some of that development can take place. And then it sounds to me like maybe they're keeping the door open that he eventually will transition to more of a tight end. But, that's speculation on my part. But there was also some teammates, including wide receiver Kendrick Law, who spoke to Bama Central. This coming from Matthew Gibson, who said Caleb Odom is a wide receiver. He is not a tight end. Quoting Law there. Law said, quote, Caleb is elite. He's the biggest receiver we have height-wise, most aggressive. When I look at him, I kind of see a George Perkins. He's real aggressive at the line. He has strong hands. He goes up to attack the ball. Continuing here, as a player, he has tremendous ball dominance. He sees the ball. He tracks the ball. He catches the ball, and he's the most aggressive at the line. People are going to fear him coming off the line. Wide receivers coach and co-offensive coordinator Jamarcus Shepard also was quoted in the piece, said, quote, he's got a wide range, catch range, the ability to absorb knowledge and information pretty quickly. His coaches at his high school did a great job preparing him for college and the expectations that are placed on him at a place like Alabama. He's been in the fire at Carrollton High School in Georgia. And this right here is an environment that's not going to shake him. He can provide some size, some ability to make 50-50 catches down the field. He's a sponge out there. He's doing everything in his power to make him successful in every situation we ask him to be in. So Caleb Odom, will Fantrax have him officially as a tight end? Oftentimes they take a cue from the official online roster. Maybe it will have dual eligibility, but it sounds like right now Odom's certainly making an impression, and we've discussed it already. If you just look down the list and simply looking, height and weight, there's a big difference between Odom and the next tallest guy, the next heaviest player. So when they're looking for matchups, especially in the red zone, I would have to expect Odom, it sounds like, is going to have a major, potential, the opportunity to make an impact as a true freshman. And that can be valuable from a fantasy standpoint, certainly, if he keeps that tight end designation. Also, one other note from the piece here that Wyndham put together, talking to Sheridan, because it's still a little bit unclear, right? Because Ryan Grubb was going to be the offensive coordinator in Tuscaloosa. He had the opportunity to go back to Seattle, will be the offensive coordinator of the Seattle Seahawks in the NFL. Sheridan got that promotion, but Kalen DeBoer, the head coach, has a background as an offensive play caller and a really, really good one. So Sheridan was asked, is the expectation he will call plays in the fall? Sheridan replied, quote, yes, that is the expectation, but I'll let Coach DeBoer handle that. Trying to get me here early. Yeah, that would be the expectation. Just a little bit of a note there. At Arkansas, the All Hogs website, Andy Hodges, gave some pretty glowing sounding information on Boise State transfer Taylen Green. We mentioned in practice number 1 that Green was the first quarterback, in that fastball period at the beginning of practice. He was the first quarterback in other drills, including some team periods. But according to Hodges, as he says in the piece, Green at quarterback is getting an awful lot of first-team reps in spring practice. Hodges also mentioned that the Razorbacks offense is running fairly smoothly, mainly, as he says, and this is not uncommon, but because they've been working together a couple of months with the quarterbacks and the receivers. Also, part of that is rule changes that have allowed for a little more time. And he continues here, says, especially with Green running things. He came in and appears to have taken charge of the quarterbacks and receivers. That's because he's been able to pick up Petrino, talking about new offensive coordinator Bobby Petrino, his offense quickly. All right, quoting here head coach Sam Pittman, after a recent Arkansas practice. Quote, we've seen some out of him, this is talking about Green, before with the walks and all this kind of stuff and meeting time he puts in and all that kind of stuff. It was different than throwing a guy in with the ones the first day of practice because the rules have allowed us to do more before practice starts. Pittman gave a little bit more of an update on the other quarterbacks in the room. Quote, they're battling in there. Talking about Malachi Singleton, had a better day today than he did on Thursday. Criswell, talking about Jacoby Criswell, is doing well. I like where KJ Jackson is at, and Taylen's doing a fine job. I like where they're at. They like each other. They're competing hard against each other. The one thing I'm seeing a little bit more out of them this year is they all seem to possess really good leadership qualities and take ownership for their own mistakes, but yet have really good leadership skills. That's what you have to have at the quarterback position. Some teammates were very positive about Green, especially Green's speed. Defender Landon Jackson said, quote, that dude can move. He has a great arm, but I feel like he can really dominate you with running the ball. There were times where I had him out leveraged wherever I was surfing. I had him out leveraged and he'd still pull it and still get inside. When it comes down to it, if he really needs to, he's going to use his speed and get those yards. Jackson also gave a little insight on offensive coordinator, other folks gave a little bit of insight on offensive coordinator Bobby Petrino. This is wide receiver Andrew Armstrong, who said, quote, everything just feels smooth. Everything feels right with the O-line, with the receivers, with the quarterbacks. It's a battle with everybody. Go, 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 Armstrong describing the offense. Just do everything fast. Make sure you're where you are. Make sure you've got your plays down. Make sure you're in the playbook. He won't yell at you as much as you think he does. He'll just make sure you got the plays going. I feel like Coach Petrino has come in and done an astonishing job of helping us learn plays and things like that. Armstrong was also very complimentary of the offensive line, said it's beautiful right now. Everybody coming to work, winter workouts, all that good stuff. So plenty of positivity early on in Fayetteville about the offense, new quarterback, who seems like Taylen Green is pretty clearly the favorite to emerge, as the leader after spring camp, leader both in terms of where he is on the depth chart, but also it sounds like his leadership skills are important, and really impressing coaches and teammates, and would expect that he's going to have a big edge entering fall camp in that job as well. At San Diego State, which is preparing to kick off spring practice on Tuesday. Just wanted to pass along some of the things that Kurt Kinney of the San Diego Union Tribune found when Sean Lewis, new head coach of the Aztecs, met with reporters over the weekend. When asked to describe his offensive philosophy, Lewis said, quote, stress the defense with tempo, space, and vertical shots. I want to be able to create as much space as possible for our skill players so they can thrive within that space, whether that's a wide receiver on the edge or down the field or a ball carrier coming out of the backfield. Once we've exhausted all options with space, then I want to get a numerical advantage by trade shifts, motions, and pre or post-snap movement so that we can get an extra hat to the point of attack. The big transition, and San Diego State is going to be very much an offense in transition if you're familiar with what, how the Aztecs operated really over the last two regimes. Brady Hoke, was a defensive-minded head coach, former defensive line coach, and then prior to that, Rocky Long, a long time defensive mind. The offenses have, not been the most impressive, to put it somewhat nicely. Lewis, of course, has a great track record of offensive success. What he did at Kent State as a head coach. In 2020, I think they led the nation in scoring in a very small sample, of course, in just conference games. But that gives you an idea of the ultimate ceiling, perhaps, of what a Sean Lewis offense can be. We saw it in the early weeks at Colorado when Lewis was the offensive coordinator in Boulder. But continuing here, Lewis said, quote, and then lastly, where are the weak points we can leverage so that we can exploit that, so that we can generate explosive shots and put as many points up on the scoreboard as possible? Lewis, according to Kenny, mentioned that he would like to see the Aztecs running 40 plays in 15 minutes. And according to Kenny, last year in that same 15 minutes, the Aztecs ran between 23 and 27 plays. So, not only are we going to see a faster pace on the field this fall, but leading up to that, it's going to be getting a lot more done in a pretty quick time period in practice. So there's a quarterback competition, of course. Two newcomers, sophomore AJ Duffy, who is transferred from Florida State, and freshman Danny O'Neill, who graduated high school early, are there and will be competing alongside returners Kyle Crum, Tobin Odell, and Javance Tupuata Johnson. When asked which quarterback will run the first play in practice, Lewis didn't give much info, said, quote, that's a great question. We'll find out on Tuesday. But also, just did want to throw out a couple of defensive notes about the Aztecs, including the fact that under new defensive coordinator Eric Schmidt, San Diego State will be transitioning to the 4-2-5. They've been a long time 3-3-5 defense. So some similarities, certainly. And Lewis noted that, quote, the aggressive nature of it isn't going to change. Honestly, the structure and the style and the development of players is different just in the structure shell. But the attacking style, the nature of what Aztec fans have come to see is not going to change at all. One thing that will change, apparently, is defensive end Garrett Fountain is expected to be, perhaps one of the top defenders for the Aztecs. Early in the offseason had decided to come back for his final year of eligibility, that extra year that he got for 2020. But according to Lewis, and this, I had missed this, just had to make the update in our CFB Winning Edge returning production database earlier today, that Fountain has instead entered the transfer portal. So, quote, I know in our initial conversation when I was hired, it was something he was going around and around about then. Ultimately, through 8 weeks, talking about strength and conditioning, and where he was at, he made a decision that was best for himself, and I wish him nothing but the best. All right, so we've got about a little less than 20 minutes left. I do want to make sure we spend a good 10 minutes or so on our team of the day, East Carolina. But other news and notes from spring practices across the country. At Pittsburgh, Noah Hiles of the Pittsburgh Post-Gazette last week had a piece that talked to running back Rodney Hammond and tight end Gavin Bartholomew, both of whom mentioned last season's struggles were key motivators for them coming back in 2024. Quote, what happened last year? I've got to shake back from that. I can't have that on my name. I would rather shake back and dig myself out of this hole than what we were last year. That's according to Rodney Hammond. Bartholomew said, quote, last year definitely wasn't great. I want to leave my name on a good season and a good note with a great team. I think this year we have a tremendous team. Of course, things went badly in the wrong direction for Pitt last year. Just a couple of years ago, this program, we're ACC champions last season. Very, very disappointing from a win-loss record standpoint, and seems like a big thing that Pat Narduzzi is doing, the head coach there, to hope to get back, on the right side of things is changing the offense. So Narduzzi brought in a 31-year-old offensive coordinator, Cade Bell, and we've heard in the past, that they're going to use the tight end more. We're going to be better on offense. They've gone back and forth from when Mark Whipple was calling plays and Kenny Pickett, Addison being the Biletnikoff winner, very pass heavy, right? Then Narduzzi, a little bit more sounded like a slower ground attack based offense. Of course, he's a defensive minded head coach, so that's part of it, but certainly didn't work out last year. So now moving back and going a little bit more up tempo again, kind of like Clemson. That seems to be more of a priority than it was over the last 2 seasons when Frank Cignetti Jr. was the offensive coordinator. But here in the piece, the new scheme is also believed to be the one that will allow high impact players such as Hammond and Bartholomew to have more of an involvement. And Bartholomew quoted here saying, Coach Bell was telling us the other day how, talking about the tight end position, will have a big role in this offense. He has high expectations, and we all expect to meet them. So we'll certainly be curious to find out in what other ways the Pitt offense is going to change. But makes a lot of sense. Hammond and Bartholomew, 2 of the best players certainly on that roster, makes a lot of sense that they will be big factors at their respective positions for the Panthers. Jacksonville State opened up spring practice or late last week. Saturday, excuse me. Jacksonville State football got spring practice started with a 2-hour practice on Saturday at JSU Stadium. That's according to Maxwell Donaldson of the Gadsden Times, who noted that all quarterbacks on the roster were getting plenty of reps. He said it did seem that Logan Smothers and Ashton Fry, who were the number 2 and number 3 behind Zion Webb last season, respectively, were leading. But, of course, it is too early to tell who the starting quarterback is going to be after one practice. Smothers was out first in drills, it sounds like, and was spotted with the starting offensive line in team drills. He said, but even that rotated throughout practice. One note from Donaldson, Sean Brown, starting tight end, is out with a shoulder injury this spring, but will be back. Thomas Ashworth of the Anniston Star grabbed some quotes from head coach Rich Rodriguez after practice. He said, quote, I thought it was pretty good for the first day. We've got some new stuff we're putting in on both sides of the ball. I think the guys had a good offseason. I was really pleased with the intensity. I try to compare it to the way our first spring practice 2 years ago, and it was night and day. Rodriguez talked a little bit about, really ramping up the intensity. And one item he noted here, just thought was kind of funny. Quote, we've always say, if you loaf, you're a traitor and you play for the other team. So we will emphasize that. Our guys will make mistakes. Even veterans will make mistakes. We just don't want to make the same ones from practice to practice. And then, effort, giving effort is certainly a big deal. On that note, at UTSA, Greg Luca of the San Antonio Express News wrote about head coach Jeff Traylor upping the intensity for the Roadrunners this offseason after he briefly backed off, it sounded like, leading into spring practice in 2023, partly because of the transfer portal and not wanting to run guys away, perhaps. But through the Roadrunners 2023 spring practices, Traylor admits that he might not have been as tough on my guys as I needed to be. Quote, that was a quote, might not have been as tough on my guys as I needed to be. He didn't want anyone to feel they had a shot at better experience or more playing time elsewhere. They don't say the name Zachary Franklin, but maybe that's part of it. Who put up huge numbers for the Roadrunners the previous couple of years, and then whether it was injury or just not establishing himself after transfer to Ole Miss, really was a bit of an afterthought last season. One item that caught my eye in this piece: in team meetings to start each day, Traylor highlights the 5 fastest players on offense and defense based on the tracking data that the players wear during practice. He also calls out the slowest offensive and defensive linemen from the previous practice. So, people do different things, emphasize different things, but that one I thought was kind of funny. A few other very quick notes before we move on to East Carolina and SMU. Quarterback Preston Stone, who's been recovering from a lower leg injury, is likely to return to full strength in May or early June, according to Jacob Richmond of Lone Star Live. At Air Force, there's some good news on the defensive side of the ball as the Falcons wrap up spring practice. Camby Goff, who was a highly rated defender in the secondary, will be back, was able to get somewhat unexpected year of eligibility. He's back on the field after missing almost all of last year. At New Mexico State, Colin Deaver of KTSM in El Paso noted, we touched on New Mexico State when they were our team of the day last week, sometime earlier. Weren't 100% sure what the deal was with Eli Stowers, who has played quarterback, was a quarterback signee at Texas A&M, transferred to New Mexico State, was expected to play the position there before spending some time at tight end. Apparently, he is moving to wide receiver full-time in 2024. So file that away. That seemingly clears the way for Deuce Hogan, the transfer who previously was at Kentucky, prior to that Iowa, or those could be flipped. I think Iowa first. But Brandon Nunez, a 3-star junior college transfer, is also considered a candidate to win that job. And new head coach Tony Sanchez was quoted here saying, "It's different." He's talking about the quarterback position. Diego Pavia, former starter, did so many things with his feet, but just day one, we threw the ball better than we did last year at this time. We've got 3 guys that can throw the ball. Parker Awad is another, Brandon Nunez, and then the junior college transfer is Parker Awad. Parker Awad and Deuce Hogan had a really good day. The other guys need to come along, but as far as being able to distribute the ball to our athletes on the outside, I actually think it's better at that. So something to keep an eye on there. Last week, John Manson of A Sea of Red gave a post-spring depth chart projection for Liberty. Of course, no surprises at quarterback with Keaton Salter, at running back with Billy Lucas and Quentin Conley as the A back and B back respectively. But at the wide receiver, just curious to see how that shakes out. Dante Lee, Trayon Sibley, and Reese Smith were listed as the projected starters at the X, Z, and H positions. Smith missed all of last season with injury, a transfer from West Virginia. Tyson Mobley, who had the 60-yard touchdown in the spring game, was projected to back up Smith. So sounds like 2 of their better players in, I believe that H position is the slot at Liberty. So we will save some other notes, have a little bit of a preview at the running back situation at Wisconsin and Minnesota. BYU had its quarterbacks live over the weekend. Oregon State quarterbacks are splitting reps. USC has a pretty heavy, favorite to start at quarterback this year. But we will now move on to East Carolina. We'll go in more depth in those sorts of things on our next show on Wednesday. But do want to spend a little time here focusing on the Pirates. And last season was rough. ECU, had really sort of slowly but consistently built its level of success under head coach Mike Houston, who was a big part of building that James Madison program into what it is now. It took a little while, but ECU finally broke through with quarterback Colton Ehlers, Keaton Mitchell at running back, a talented group of receivers that were really rolling through. And that offensive group was, a big consistent part of it. Also improvement on the defensive side of the ball, really played a role as the Pirates emerged as a bowl team in 2022. Then this time last year, we were talking about ECU being, among the very, very bottom in our returning production numbers. I mean, all of the, Ehlers, Mitchell, basically the entire receiving core, tight end position at the start of, I mean, it was across the board that ECU, especially on offense, was just starting over in a lot of ways, quite frankly. So, last season, it wasn't great that they had to start with the team that emerged as the national champions, Michigan in week 1, a tough couple of Sun Belt opponents, Marshall and App State, to lead off. So they started 0-3, got a win over an FCS program, and then didn't win again for a while until the month of November. Did pick up a 22-7 victory at FAU, but every other game was a loss. Finished 2-10, and then this year there's still plenty that's new, but according to early reports, a lot of the new faces are expected to make a real positive impact, especially on the offensive side of the ball. So East Carolina is kind of middle of the pack in returning production, not on the extreme high end. After completely starting over last year, they're 77th in our current numbers, 63rd on our offensive adjusted production numbers, 85th on defense. But there's a lot of optimism at the quarterback position. Kaiten Hauser was a starter, ended up getting starting reps at Michigan State last year. He and Jake Garcia, who is transferred, started his career at Miami, then went to Missouri, where, as we talked about a little earlier, part of the reason Mizzou was in a bit of an issue, had a little bit of an issue with quarterback depth, is because Garcia moved on to have an opportunity at ECU. Those two seem to be, in a 50-50 battle at East Carolina this spring. Read up on Hoist the Colors, the 247 site that covers ECU, which is a great site. They're not a ton of G5 programs that really get extensive reporting like Stephen Igo and the staff at Hoist the Colors, but they've got a spring practice preview series that is coming together now, and definitely am referencing it a bit here. So sounds like a 50-50 quarterback battle. There's also a little bit of optimism that one of the returners, Raheem Jeter, who got very little action behind Alex Finn and Mason Garcia at quarterback last season, but he is highly athletic, so perhaps he could have a role maybe as a dark horse candidate to start. But Hauser, I would expect will be, I might give it 51-49 with Hauser the slight edge in my expectations, but we'll of course see how it plays out. There's also a new offensive coordinator, John David Baker, coming over from Ole Miss. The running game was a major disappointment last season. From the running back preview piece here, I'm going to quote a little bit of it. So overall was an unproductive year running the football for East Carolina. Blame the scheme, blame the offensive line, blame the running backs. No one in the backfield looked like a true number one in 2023. And it's a question again heading into 2024, even with the experienced depth returning. So on paper, this is actually an area where ECU looks kind of on the high side. There is a good bit of experience with Rajay Harris, who really had his best moments maybe as a true freshman a few years ago. He will be a senior this year, has dealt with significant injury in the past. That perhaps has been a factor in why he averaged 3.8 yards per carry last season, ran for 485 yards and 5 touchdowns. But again, blame the scheme, blame the offensive line. It's not just Harris, but Javius Bond played in 8 games as a true freshman, ran for 221 yards and a touchdown. Kamaro Edmonds was a highly recruited running back that signed with North Carolina coming out of high school. He only had 14 carries last season in 7 games. Marlon Gunn Jr., there was a lot of optimism that he could supplant Harris as the starter this time last year. He had 24 carries, 65 yards, did not score. So there's depth there. But, how will it all shake out is certainly a question. Everything I've read for the last couple of years seems to indicate that Harris is one of the team leaders and really could continue to perhaps be the number one guy at running back there. Their receiving group, there's a lot of optimism because transfer last year, but the top returning receiver, Chase Sowell, who had 47 catches, 622 yards, 1 touchdown. He's a big target at 6'4", and returns Jalen Johnson, Jahai Hatfield, who were number 2 and 3 in receptions and receiving yards last season. Those guys have moved on, so there are opportunities for incoming transfers. The most notable of which, perhaps, is former All Big 12 wide receiver Winston Wright Jr. He had a 2-year stint at Florida State, and quote, according to all reports this winter indicate Wright is operating at a high level in workouts. The slot position has been a little bit of an issue since Tyler Snead left the program, but White could certainly slot into that position, pun somewhat unintended, I guess, and take over that role and be a great complement to Sowell. And then 2 other incoming transfers are going to compete for starting reps as well. Anthony Smith from NC State and Omega Blake from South Carolina, both of whom are expected to compete on the outside, and both of whom are speed wide receivers. So the offense is definitely in transition for ECU. The defense is as well. As we said, the returning production number is even lower there. Top tackler Julius Wood is gone. Fellow linebacker, linebackers BJ Davis and Jeremy Lewis are out of eligibility. Taylor Jackson, a linebacker who was a top 5 tackler last season, has transferred out. Ron Dilworth, who was a highly regarded transfer coming in last year, has also transferred out. So there's certainly opportunities for guys to come in, make an impact in multiple ways this season. How will the schedule shake out? Should start a little bit better. You get that FCS opponent in week 1 this time. Norfolk State should be able to start out with a win. Then a couple of Sunbelt opponents, and they're fairly tough matchups at Old Dominion in week 2, home against App State in week 3. So, can ECU get to a 2-1 start? I think it's certainly possible, but 1 and 2 is definitely just as likely, perhaps. The last non-conference game at Liberty, they open up AAC conference play, hosting UTSA. So those two, things certainly don't get easier, but they do have Charlotte. They get a week off before traveling to face new AAC rival Army. They get Temple at home, then a week off. The Thursday night game against FAU, who they beat last year, as we said. 2 back-to-back long road trips at Tulsa, at North Texas. That's kind of tough in November. That Tulsa game is also a Thursday night, so back-to-back Thursday nights in November. And then Navy comes to Greenville November 30th for the regular season finale. So there are winnable schedule, or winnable games. I would say even the games against App State and Liberty, ECU could, if things come together quickly with this new quarterback situation, if the rushing attack under the new offensive coaching staff really takes a major step forward, if those transfer receivers come together, if the offensive line, which is a pretty experienced unit, 4 full-time starters are back, that is great news. So if this offense takes a big step forward next season, and I think it's certainly possible, then ECU can be much more competitive, can really improve. I mean, they were 134th in our offensive team performance, or 132nd, I should say, in our offensive team performance numbers last year. Just about as bad as it gets. 131st passing, 130th rushing. If you get up to somewhere, like FBS average, then I think East Carolina is going to be in the mix for a bowl game. So something to keep an eye on, certainly, with so much going on in Greenville. But that is going to wrap it up for episode 21. We will be back on Wednesday. No Good Morning College Football on Thursday or Tuesday or Thursday this week. Join us again, please, live at 10 a.m. on Wednesday, March 13th. Do reach out if you've got questions, if there's something that you think that we have overlooked. We'll definitely try to gather, and always do try to gather, as much from a variety of sources as we can. Thank you very much to all of those beat reporters out there, those team sites who do a great job covering these teams. Hopefully we are appropriately giving credit to those sources. Definitely try to do that. They are doing so much groundwork, and we are trying to gather that information and package it for you, our viewers. Hopefully, be fairly efficient with that. And if you like what we're doing here, we very much would appreciate you subscribing to the Campus to Canton YouTube channel. Would love if you would like this video. Help us to continue the momentum. I believe we set another record for live viewership today, so that is great news. We very much appreciate you tuning in, and then also would love if you would consider becoming a member at campustocanton.com. You can join for as little as $2.99 per month, or take advantage of a wide range of membership options that go all the way up to our C2C Winning Edge and all 22 memberships, which give you the most in-depth look at everything that we've got. So on that note, I will spend the next 48 hours working on our team profiles, looking to make a big dent in that level of work, so that we can get those ready to publish as quickly as possible. May 1st is our current target date to make those available to our All 22 and C2C Winning Edge members at campustocanton.com. I'm Nicholas Ian Allen. This has been Good Morning College Football, and we will see you Wednesday. Take care.